You're back on talkSPORT End Zone, talkSPORT's brand new dedicated NFL YouTube channel, and also live on the radio across the UK. We bring you exclusive coverage every week from the NFL, including this past Sunday when the San Francisco 49ers went into Levi's South, aka SoFi Stadium, and came away with what has been regarded as one of the most difficult, embarrassing losses of the Kyle Shanahan era. And a man who's written so eloquently about that today. When you read a piece and it really gets your thoughts out onto paper or out onto the internet, and you think I'm glad someone else processed that for me in a way that I couldn't, was the brilliant Mike Silver from the San Francisco Chronicle. Mike, how are you doing, sir?
I'm great, Will. Thank you so much for those very kind words. And yeah, it's a very different column than I expected to write. And I'm pretty good about not believing games are over. As a high school senior, I attended the famous Cal Stanford game with the 5 lateral kickoff through the band that we called the play. Ended up going to Cal. And so I always kind of hedge. But in this case, the 49ers jumped out to a 14-0 lead. Looked like they'd build on it. Then were poised to go up by 2 scores again late with a kicker who's been really reliable. And in the final 2:43, it just all completely changed on me. And so, as brilliant as Brock Purdy I thought was, without many of his top skill players, and I was all ready to write about that. All of a sudden, it became a column about you said it really well. One of the worst, I would say, maybe the most vexing regular season defeat of the Shanahan era, as far as I can remember, and just having a game in hand and inexplicably letting it slip away.
It's that juxtaposition, though, isn't it, between Brock Purdy having maybe his best regular season game as a starter, and you take those 6 drop passes out of the situation, which we've talked about kind of so much across everywhere over the last sort of 24 hours since this game finished. But you take that out and you suddenly got a guy who's going 28 of 30. And I know it's not quite as simple as that, but he was near perfect without George Kittle, without CMC, without Debo, finding Jawan Jennings to have a career day.
And my favorite play wasn't even a throw. It was the run for the first down where he, avoids the sack and then jukes a guy, gets to the sidelines and decides to leap perfectly so that the ball stays in bounds, outstretched, but he gets out of bounds so he doesn't get pummeled. And that could have been the game
When he
sequence.
Pump fakes Quentin Lake's soul clean out of his body and then jukes. And that's not a Brock Purdy play. I'm as big a Brock Purdy fan as you can find, but that's the sort of thing that, it's become a cliche at this point, but Mahomes or Allen does that and the internet explodes, right?
Right.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, he's, he is very, very accurate, as you know, and processes so quickly and can move better than people realize. But the stone cold killer part of him, the cold blooded part of him that he hides very well with a very friendly personality, most of the time, that shouldn't be underestimated. And I've seen that very early. And in fact, great chance for me to talk about the book I have coming out October 1st, which is called The Why is Everything, a story of football, rivalry, and revolution. And it's about the Shanahan-McVay coaching tree and kind of starts with Mike Shanahan and Steve Young, which I covered as a young beat writer. But one of the perks of spending a lot of time with Mike Shanahan as I was reporting this book was that we spent a bunch of time in May and June and the fall of 2022. And I remember we had a meal at his restaurant in May, and Mike had started seeing some OTA tape, and we were talking about Trey Lance, and Mike starts talking about Brock Purdy, who's the 262nd pick of the draft. And obviously Kyle didn't believe he was going to be amazing, or they would have picked him a lot higher, but liked him enough. And Mike had now seen OTA tape and was raving about him. And I just kind of took it in. And then it happened even in a more pronounced way in June. And there's a chapter late in the book that says, "Don't let him out," and that's a scene where the day before Trey Lance's first start as the unquestioned starter in 2023, before they play the Bears, I go to Mike Shanahan's hotel in downtown Chicago, and we're hanging out, and we're talking about Trey Lance, and he again pivots to Purdy, and he says, "When you have a guy like that in your building, you don't let him out." And I'm thinking, I think we're talking about Brock Purdy. Like, I've seen some of it, but like, that's a really strong, like, that's Mike Shanahan, who I've known for decades and is one of the most brilliant offensive minds of his generation or any generation, and two-time Super Bowl champion, et cetera, et cetera. And he's talking about this guy like, he is this rare gem. And it turns out Mike Shanahan still got it, among other things, because that is absolutely true. You don't let him out, and they will not let him out.
The article you did yesterday posted that there are some very tough questions that will need to be asked very quickly if this team that imagine themselves as a potential Super Bowl champion this year are going to come anywhere near to achieving that outcome. So from your perspective, to get right quickly ahead of the Patriots and then a tough run again, I mean, it's a tough schedule this year in general. What needs fixing now and what questions need asking now?
Well, you kind of got to step back, and Joe Montana taught me this when I first got on the beat, that he was asked what's the biggest impediment to repeating, or in his case, trying to win a third in a row. And he said flatly, injury luck. Usually when you win, you have it for the most part, and then it's really hard to sustain that because the odds, of football catch up to you. And even though it's hard to think of it this way, because the 49ers lost an NFC championship game where they ran out of quarterbacks and one of them suffered a ruinous injury in Purdy, they had pretty good injury luck in 22 and 23, especially last year, if you look at impact players and games actually missed. So that's happening, bad injury luck. And we now know Christian McCaffrey spent the weekend in Germany. That's never a great sign when an elite athlete is leaving the continent to explore other treatment. And I would say the same thing if it were a German soccer star coming out here. I'd be like, that doesn't sound great, because there's good doctors in most of these places. It just means you're trying to get really cutting edge in some way. But Javon Hargrave looks like he's out for the season. They're talking about potentially at the end of a playoff run he could come back, but that's rough. Kittle, Debo, and they missed that game, as you said, and they've had other stuff. So, part of it is that. Part of it is, let's be honest, Kyle Shanahan scapegoated Steve Wilks last season. It was a first-year defensive coordinator. They played really good defense in the Super Bowl, but weren't up to the previous standards set by DeMeco Ryans the year before, and fired him after a year. And it was all like, we're going to go in-house, back to basics with Nick Sorensen, but we're also going to bring in Brandon Staley, who had so much success as the Rams defensive coordinator in 2020, and then a rough go as Chargers coach, to kind of oversee it and freshen up the back. So, I would say it falls on Sorensen so far, and I'm not saying it's his fault or he's going to get scapegoated, but I saw what happened to Steve Wilks, who's a really good coach, and I'm kind of like, But if I were Kyle Shanahan, I wouldn't even be thinking about Nick Sorensen, because my head would be exploding when I think about special teams. And Brian Schneider, now in his third year, has got to be really worried about that, because their special teams have been especially atrocious, and it's a fiasco, and it cost them this game with the fake punt that they allowed, the missed field goal. Okay, that was 55 yards, but then to give up a long punt return that put the Rams in position to win the game was unconscionable.
How are you punting that? Where you punt it, right into the guy's arms, making it returnable. Like, it is just... even if you put it flat out the back of the end zone, which it might be difficult from that distance, but out of bounds, just get it anywhere where it is not returnable.
Yeah, because presumably in that situation, you would kick a kickoff out of the end zone and put it at the
100%.
30. So how do you not kick a punt out of the end zone and put it at the 20? So, yeah, I think you saw the trickle-down effect when Ronnie Bell, their number 5 receiver, who may not be on the team too much longer on the active roster, dropped that great Purdy pass that would have put him in position for a game winner. Jaywan Jennings obviously stepping up, but when your 3 becomes essentially your 1 yesterday, along with Ayuk, who was okay, but then now all of a sudden that's Ronnie Bell running that route instead of maybe Jaywan Jennings. And so there's all of that, but there's also it's really hard every year to dig deep and say we're going to try to get back. And football's hard. And to Shanahan and his players' credit, they've done it over and over, and they've survived crises in the process. They had 2019, they were on the brink. 2020 was a horrible injury year. It all went to crap. COVID happened. Then 2021, they were 3-5 and looked dead in the water and had an incredible rally to get to within a Jaquiski Tart dropped interception, likely of going to the Super Bowl. In 2022, they were 3-4. The McCaffrey trade had just happened, and then they went on a tear, ultimately with Purdy. Last season, after that 5-0 start and that drubbing of the Cowboys, they lost 3 in a row going into the bye. Steve Wilkes was being scapegoated for the 0 blitz in Minnesota. So they've been really good about pulling out. So I would say all the signs are bad, and they're getting older and more beat up. But the one thing that I would hedge on here is they've got a quarterback who's, in my opinion, better than most people understand still, and he's getting better. And you saw it on Sunday, and I wasn't surprised because people were like, oh, now he doesn't have his weapons. Let's see. I'm thinking, yeah, you're going to see. He's really good. And so if you have an ascending young elite quarterback, it can give you a lot of hope even when things are lousy. So if you compare it to 2020 when it was all going to crap, Jimmy Garoppolo messed up his ankle, and now you're playing Nick Mullins, and it just felt like a lost season. If Brock Purdy can stay healthy, it gives you a belief that they can maybe round into something.
Mike, it is always a genuine pleasure, and people do need to be checking out when it comes out at the start of next month. The Why Is Everything. If you've followed this story at all, and they love tweeting out a picture of that Washington coaching staff with all those guys on it, and so many head coach, offensive coordinators around the league right now who are affecting
bad
football.
Haircuts.
Yeah,
really bad haircuts. And I do want everyone to know this: the pre-order link is out. So, and there's audio and Kindle and all that. But since it comes out October 1st, if you want to go to any of my social media handles, all my bios have links. It's on Amazon and anywhere else you'd find a pre-order, possibility. But you can have it in your hands very soon. And I really believe sincerely that you're going to like it. And here's why. Because I've read it about 900 times now, and I should hate it by all rights, and I still like it. So if I still like it, I'm confident that you will too.
You're a man who rarely, when I've discussed your own work with you, have been that positive. So to hear it's that good, I'm very, very excited. Mike, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed this chat, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe to the channel, and fire in any thoughts on the 49ers. You may have already seen my ranting video from last night. If you've not, it's basically this, but a lot angrier, and I was a lot redder in the face. And there'll be plenty more reaction with the rundown coming out tomorrow for you on talkSPORT.